In its heart, mead is but three things: honey, water, and yeast. In this episode of Doing the Most, we're going to make a honey wine using blueberries, also called a melomel. This is 20 pounds of blueberries, frozen at the peak of freshness. I opted to put them all in the bucket and mash as best I could, then top off with some water and mash some more. Add 2 CAMPDEN tablets just to suppress any microbial growth. Then top up with a little bit more water so everything is covered. These are 1-gallon jugs of spring water that I'm using here, as well as a couple bottles of just regular purified water, just to get it up to that 5-gallon mark. Stir, stir, stir. These are going to cold soak for 1 week. This will help draw out more color from the skins. I didn't catch a clip of it, but I added pectic enzyme before putting the lid on. The pectic enzyme will help break down the pectins in the fruit, releasing more color and more flavor and helping it clarify better once we get to the fining process after it's done bulk aging. Pour yourself a nice homebrew tepache. Then we're going to add the honey. I'm starting with 6 pounds. So here I'm measuring out 1 pound, and then I'll add a full 5. And I'll be adding honey here and there throughout the process, as well as when I do my racking here in a bit. This is a hand scale that I got on eBay years ago, and it's been an invaluable tool in the brewing process. This is another bottle of honey that I had, a 5-pound bottle. Poured it out, filled it up with water, poured it out again. Stir, stir, stir. Once that's pretty well stirred up, we'll add 12 ounces of chopped raisins. And it's not homebrewing if you're not making a mess, so make sure a few of the raisins fall on the floor. Stir, stir, stir. And then here's the money shot. This is a week of cold soaking. Boom. Look at that pour. You'll be surprised at the end of primary just how little solids are actually left from all of these berries. Stir, stir, stir. And I had another bottle of honey sitting around, from which I am adding 1 pound. So that brings up our total to 7 pounds for the initial fermentation. Take a hydrometer reading. It was so pulpy it was nearly impossible to read, but ballparked it at around 1.12. This is Red Star Premier Rouge yeast. It's good for color and tannin extractions from red wines. I'm gonna sprinkle that on. Then I'm adding a malolactic culture. This will convert malic acid to the softer lactic acid, and I'm going to do this in concert with the yeast fermentation. Sometimes folks will do this at the end of the yeast fermentation as a secondary fermentation. That's customary. But from everything I read, it is perfectly acceptable to do both fermentations at once, and so we're good to go there. I'm fermenting this somewhat open. I like to do this during my initial stages of fermentation. So usually what I'll do is put a sanitized paper towel over the bung and put a shot glass over that. And that acts as a rudimentary airlock while still providing some oxygen to the must. So over the coming days, I'm adding step feedings of nutrient, in this case diammonium phosphate, multiple times a day, every day, for the first week or so of fermentation, punching the cap to make sure that everything stays moist inside this bucket. Nothing dries out and starts to grow mold on top. And after a few days, I tasted this and I could tell it was going to need acid and tannin, as is typical in a blueberry wine. So I added a powdered acid blend, which is citric acid, tartaric and malic acids, and then the powdered tannin is just a powdered wine tannin. I believe this one was made of chestnut bark. So when you're ready to rack that off, you're gonna pour yourself a terrible glass of, I think this was a Cupcake brand Pinot. It was very thin, had no body, no flavor, no tannins, just kind of funky grape juice. Yuck. So first I am going to scoop out the skins and press out the remaining juice. And I'll just make a note here, it's safe to assume that if the must touches a piece of equipment, I have sanitized it with Starzan. So no worries about this rustic looking Dutch oven. Everything has been dunked in sanitizer. So I'm just scooping out the skins and placing them in this colander. I'm going to use a piece of sanitized cheesecloth and my sanitized hands to press this remaining juice out so we get as much extraction as possible. Wine goes in and press, press, press. Now I'm not throwing the skins away. They're actually going to go in with the yeast cake from this to start a batch of a lemon wine called Skeeter Pea. I'll post that recipe link in the comments. On this racking, also I'm adding another couple of pounds of honey, which will bring our total honey for this whole batch to 9 pounds at this point. And we're going to start the siphon, and away we go. I definitely had trouble getting the flow to stay constant in this. There was lots of pulp getting caught in the racking cane. But here you can see the beauty of it once it was racked off. If your work table doesn't look like a crime scene, you might be doing it wrong. I love this color on this mead. Here it is alongside a Merlot and a Show Mead, both in primary. And here's the trube at the bottom after the fermentation stopped. Kind of looks like the surface of Jupiter. And don't forget to steal a taste. And don't forget to sprinkle a little bit of that on the floor before you're done. So we've got another 5 pounds of honey here. I'm gonna top this off as best I can to remove the headspace. And I was going for about half the bottle, and you'll see here that I'm a little bit proud of myself for nailing it right at the halfway point. And stir, stir, stir. For this I'm using the handle end of a mash paddle, and you may notice I'm using silicone bungs these days instead of a traditional airlock. I prefer this style. I like that they're dishwasher safe. They provide a relatively good seal. I've aged a Merlot under one of these for up to 3 years and didn't experience any issues with it, so I believe in these. Now this is going to go down in the basement for a month or so. By this point in the fermentation, my calculations put this must at about 14% alcohol. I tasted it, it's bone dry. So we're gonna rack it off and oak it. So let's get some oak in there. I love this little pot with its accompanying strainer. Works really well for this purpose as well as for making macaroni. I dumped in 9 ounces of medium toast oak, knowing that I'd drop enough on the floor to come out to about 8 ounces, which is half a pound. So put that in there with some water, boil for 10 minutes. And make no mistake, these chips were very hot. You can see the steam there. Get all our oak chips in there. Look at that money shot. That's beautiful. I poured a glass of wine left over from a get-together a few days prior. This one was much better than the cupcake Pinot. It was a 2015 Italian red. So rack that onto the oak chips. And it's ready for the basement. Now, never mind the August date on that label. I was definitely living a month behind when I wrote that. This went into bulk aging September 4th and probably won't be touched again for 2 years. The malolactic culture is still active at this point, maybe so for another 6 months. So I am going to sit on my hands and be patient and let this melomel do its thing. So this is a little window into my eager process for making this melomel. I'm going to do some other videos in the interim on other meads and other fermentables, as well as a few other things, but I wanted to go ahead and put this one out so y'all could see the initial process, and here, hopefully in 1 year to 2 years, probably closer to 2 years, I'll do another video updating on the bottling and tasting process. Stay tuned.